We're heading into the middle of the Atlantic now because we're going to look at one of the most famous shipwrecks of all time.
The Titanic had been missing at the bottom of the ocean for decades until 1985. That's when Robert Ballard located the wreckage about 400 miles off the coast of Newfoundland.
It's an incredible view. More people are getting a chance to see up close.
We know more about space than we do about the bottom of our own oceans, such as the depth and the complexity of getting down there.
Okay, that is pretty cool. OceanGate plans to survey the Titanic. They're also bringing 54 paying civilians along.
This is an experimental sub. People are informed that it's very dangerous down there.
Carbon fiber is a great material. It's better than titanium.
Anything when you're trying something outside the box, people inside the box think you're nuts. We only have one button, that's it. We run the whole thing with this game control.
Come on!
At some point, safety just is pure waste. I think I can do this just as safely by breaking the rules.
Once the pressure vessel is, you're certain it's not going to collapse on everybody, everything else can fail.
This frame will feel about 150 million pounds of pressure near the ocean floor, but the team inside won't feel a thing.
Join us as we dive deep into the events of the horrific OceanGate disaster, a Titanic failure.
These are the last known photos of the Titan submersible. They were taken on Sunday morning, just before it began its descent. An hour and 45 minutes later, contact was lost.
This is a disaster full of eerie foreboding, full of tragic ups and downs, and also fully preventable. And in order to fully understand what happened to the OceanGate Titan submersible, we must go back to where this story truly began. So, who is OceanGate? Well, OceanGate is a private company founded in 2009 by billionaires Stockton Rush and Guillermo Suleman. Since 2010, they've transported paying customers in leased commercial submersibles off the coast of California, in the Gulf of Mexico, and in the Atlantic Ocean. CEO Stockton Rush realized that visiting shipwreck sites was a great way to get media attention, and although OceanGate had previously conducted trips to other shipwrecks, including its 2016 dive to the wreck of the Andrea Doria aboard their other submersible Cyclops 1.
Well, this is the first time a manned submersible has gone to the wreck of the Andrea Doria in over 20 years. So it was a very unique and important expedition.
In 2019, Rush told Smithsonian Magazine of his true intentions and dreams. There's only one wreck that everyone knows. If you ask to name something under the water, it's going to be sharks, whales, or the Titanic. And thus, the idea of Titan was spawned. Formerly known as Cyclops 2, Titan was a 5-person submersible vessel operated by OceanGate Inc. The 22-foot-long and 23,000-pound vessel was constructed from carbon fiber and titanium. The entire pressure vessel consisted of 2 titanium hemispheres with matching titanium interface rings bonded to the internal diameter and a 7.9 carbon fiber wound cylinder. Stockton Rush grew almost obsessive with the Titanic and Titan itself, and was determined to show the world and civilians the true wonders of the deep ocean. OceanGate had built a submersible that could supposedly withstand the rigorous pressures of the deep ocean and beyond, and so it would prove to be true. Titan dives to Titanic took place on a more regular basis during multi-day excursions organized by OceanGate, which the company referred to as missions. 5 missions took place in the summer of 2021 and 2022. Passengers would sail to and from the wreckage site aboard a support ship and spend approximately 5 days in the ocean above the Titanic wreckage site. 2 dives were usually attempted during each excursion, although dives were often cancelled or aborted due to weather or, get this, technical malfunctions. Each dive typically had a pilot and a guide and 3 paying passengers on board. Once inside the submersible, the hatch would actually be bolted shut from the outside.
This was filmed by the BBC last year. It shows people being bolted in from the outside.
Much like tuna in a can. The descent from the surface to the Titanic typically took 2 hours, with the full dive taking above 8 hours in total. Throughout the journey, the submersible was expected to emit a safety ping every 15 minutes to be monitored by the above-water crew. The vessel and surface crew were also able to communicate via short text messages. And of course, there was also space for paying customers. They travelled to the Titanic with OceanGate and were referred to by the company as mission specialists. And you might be wondering the cost of such a ticket. Well, that would set you back about $250,000 for the 8-day expedition, and that's per person. Now that we understand a bit more about OceanGate as a commercial entity, we can return to June 18th, 2023, where Titan was being deployed from the MV Polar Prince and began its routine dive to explore the wreckage of the Titanic. On board the vessel were 5 crew members. Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a 77-year-old former French Navy diver and renowned explorer, 48-year-old British Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood, and his son, 19-year-old Suleman, 58-year-old British businessman Hamish Harding, and finally, of course, Stockton Rush himself. Approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive, communication with Titan was suddenly lost and the submersible failed to resurface at the scheduled time. Something had gone drastically wrong, and those aboard the Polar Prince had no way of determining what had happened. Panic began to set in, and a search operation was initiated with rough calculations of only about 40 hours of oxygen remaining inside the sub.
The vessel may only have 40 hours of breathable air left for the 5 people on board.
Suddenly, those above the surface were now in a race against time to somehow locate the sub. Questions also began to emerge. What could possibly have been the cause for its disappearance? Over the next 2 days, resources from all over the deep sea exploration community were gathered together with the sole aim of finding these poor 5 crew members.
Crews now combing an area 2 times the size of Connecticut to locate the Titan sub and its 5 passengers.
The story had now garnered international news and was trending across all of social media. A worldwide gasp and a collective holding of our breaths, almost mimicking the scenario of those stuck inside the Titan, perhaps gesturing that just maybe, if we could hold our breaths, they could hold theirs. The odds stacked against them, with everyone now barely able to hold their breaths any longer, as the hours agonizingly ticked down.
There's potentially less than 24 hours of oxygen supply left on board that missing submersible.
But then, there it was, a glimmer of hope for those inside and their loved ones on the surface.
As Canadian surveillance aircraft detected underwater noises in the search area for a second day on Wednesday.
The bangs were being deciphered and the search continued, time now ticking away, not by the hours, but by the minutes. Hope was deteriorating from family and friends, and the grave reality of search parties turning into recovery parties was starting to sink in. The next morning, time had elapsed.
We understand that there is confirmation now from the U.S. Coast Guard that portions of the external body of the Titan have been discovered roughly 500 meters off the bow of the Titanic. They were discovered at approximately 8:55 a.m. Eastern Time, but according to this memo from the Coast Guard, Paula, the search for the crew continues.
The questions would now shift from where to why and how such a tragic disaster could take place. The answers are shocking and mind-boggling.
OceanGate shouldn't have been doing what it was doing. I think that's pretty clear.
I mean, I've seen submersibles, and they are banks of controls, like cockpit after cockpit.
Exactly. And this is to other submersibles what the iPhone was to the BlackBerry. I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
Details of shortcuts, deniability, and fears surrounding the integrity of the Titan submersible started to emerge along with its remains.
What went so tragically wrong is now under investigation. The BBC has seen emails which show that warnings over the safety of the Titan sub were dismissed by the company's CEO.
The cause of the implosion was attributed to the failure of the pressure hull of the submersible during its descent. The United States Navy detected an acoustic signature consistent with an implosion around the time communication was lost, suggesting the pressure hull had collapsed, resulting in the instantaneous deaths of all 5 occupants.
Its non-spherical shape, the reliability of the material it was made of, carbon fibre, and the fact it had also not been through any external independent certification or classing process.
More and more details will continue to emerge, but a pattern of responsibility and neglect appears to be floating on top of now calmer seas.
The arrogance and the hubris that sent that ship to its doom is exactly the same thing that sent those people in that sub to their fate.
It seems like a lot of the way you made this is by taking off-the-shelf parts and sort of MacGyvering them together.
Yeah, pretty much. And definitely an outlier. There were a lot of rules out there that didn't make engineering sense to me. There's certain things that you want to be buttoned down, and that's the pressure vessel. Once the pressure vessel is, you're certain it's not going to collapse on everybody, everything else can fail. Your thrusters can go, your lights can go, you're still going to be safe.
The messages were exchanged with a leading deep-sea exploration specialist. These were over the craft's unusual design. Until a sub is classed, tested and proven, it should not be used for commercial deep dive operations. I've grown tired of industry players who try to use a safety argument to stop innovation and new entrants from entering their small existing market. Since Guillermo, the former co-founder of OceanGate, and I started OceanGate, we've heard the baseless cries of, "You are going to kill someone way too often." I take this as a serious personal insult.
Foolhardy and stubborn can sometimes easily be mixed, and it seems Stockton Rush was ready to put his life on the line to prove his innovation.
Now, the next day, Rob McCallum replied in the starkest terms. "I think you are potentially placing yourself and your clients in a dangerous dynamic. Ironically, in your race to Titanic, you are mirroring that famous catch cry, 'She is unsinkable.'"
You know, the community, our community of deep ocean engineers spoke out against it quite loudly, and the warnings were unheeded.
Stories now emerge from lucky and successful participants on previous OceanGate missions, who heard cracking in the hull as they reached high-pressure depths.
He knew there was risk involved at that stage, and at one point I was actually even able to drive the submarine towards deeper water by the sound of the cracking getting louder.
Others who almost made the trip but are now feeling blessed that they chose to pass on the experience.
It's safer than flying in a helicopter or even scuba diving. My son's friend researched what could go wrong and put a little scare in him. Financier Jay Bloom texted Rush, but Rush dismissed their fears as stupid stuff. How do you feel about that now?
Stockton actually believed what he was saying. His intentions were good. He had a good heart. He was a good man. He believed in he drank his own Kool-Aid.
And those who knew that it was only a matter of time.
We all knew that the danger was delamination and progressive failure over time with microscopic water ingress and fatigue, what they call cycling fatigue. And we knew that if the sub passed its pressure test, it wasn't going to fail on the first dive. Now there's one wreck lying next to the other wreck for the same damn reason.
The loss of Titan and the lives of the individuals on board is a profound tragedy, with the incident underscoring the need for continuous improvement in safety practices and adherence to rigorous standards in order to prevent similar accidents happening in the future.
Would not be allowed to work in British coastal waters because it would have required it to be certified. Same thing in Canada. And then turns out that they operated in international waters where no Coast Guard has jurisdiction. Well, you found 2 loopholes, and let's just say it wasn't very wise.
As the waters settle and the ripples of this tragedy take time to still, questions will inevitably remain. So we ask you, who do you think is to blame? And how could this have been prevented from happening? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Give this video a like and subscribe to see more disastrous content just like this on Disaster Zone.